London is supposed to be one of the world's most expensive, most competitive, most impossible cities to buy property in. For years, we've been told the same story again and again. Demand is endless, space is limited, prices can only go one way, and anyone waiting for a crash is dreaming. But today, something doesn't add up. In the heart of this global city, at a time when families are struggling to rent a single room, more than 2,500 flats are sitting completely empty. Not unfinished, not abandoned, but fully built, ready to live in, and yet locked away from the market. And now, that contradiction has exploded into a full-blown political and economic crisis, pushing London's mayor into what many are calling a public breakdown. Welcome to UK Economic Report, your go-to channel for the latest updates on the UK economy. From inflation and interest rates to housing trends and government policies, we break down the numbers so you can understand how they impact your finances. To understand why this matters so much, you first need to understand how London's property market was built over the last 2 decades. London stopped being just a place to live and slowly turned into a global financial product. Apartments were no longer homes first. They became assets, safety deposit boxes in the sky. Overseas investors poured billions into luxury developments, not to rent them out, not to live in them, but simply to park money in what was considered one of the safest property markets on earth. Developers happily catered to this demand, building towers of high-end flats marketed more in overseas showrooms than on British streets. For a long time, the system appeared to work. Prices kept rising, developers kept building, councils collected fees, and politicians pointed to cranes on the skyline as proof of success. But beneath the surface, a dangerous imbalance was forming. Homes were being built that ordinary Londoners could never afford, while genuinely affordable housing lagged far behind. The city became richer on paper and poorer in lived reality. Fast forward to today, and the cracks are no longer hidden. Interest rates have risen sharply, mortgages are more expensive than most people imagined possible just a few years ago, and the era of cheap money that fueled endless property speculation is over. At the same time, international capital is no longer flooding into London the way it once did. Some investors are pulling out, others are waiting, and many are discovering that these so-called safe assets aren't so liquid after all. This is where the 2,500 empty flats come in. These properties are symbols of a market that lost touch with reality. They represent capital frozen in concrete, homes that exist but function as nothing more than balance sheet entries. And when journalists, housing campaigners, and opposition politicians started highlighting just how many units are sitting unused, the pressure on City Hall intensified rapidly. The mayor, who has long positioned himself as a champion of renters and affordable housing, suddenly found himself trapped between rhetoric and reality. On one side, angry residents asking how it is possible that people are sleeping in temporary accommodation while thousands of flats remain empty. On the other side, powerful developers and investors warning that any aggressive action could spook the market and make things even worse. What followed was a series of tense public appearances, defensive statements, and visible frustration. Instead of calm reassurances, the tone shifted. Interviews became sharper, press conferences felt strained. At times, it looked less like political leadership and more like damage control under extreme pressure. Critics quickly labeled it a breakdown, not just emotionally, but strategically. Because the truth is, the mayor doesn't have an easy solution. Forcing owners to sell or rent empty flats risks legal battles and capital flight. Doing nothing fuels public anger and exposes the failure of housing policy. Introducing higher taxes on vacant properties sounds popular, but it doesn't magically turn luxury investment units into affordable family homes. Every option carries serious consequences. Meanwhile, the wider property market is watching closely. Developers are already struggling with higher construction costs, tighter financing, and weaker demand. Some projects have been paused, others are being quietly restructured. Estate agents report that high-end flats are taking longer to sell, price cuts are becoming more common, and confidence is slipping. This isn't a dramatic overnight crash, but it is a slow, unsettling shift in momentum. For landlords, the situation is just as uncomfortable. New regulations, higher interest rates, and political hostility toward private renting have pushed many small landlords to sell up. That adds more supply to the market, but not necessarily at prices first-time buyers can afford. Instead, it increases volatility and uncertainty, especially in areas that were once considered rock solid. Renters, meanwhile, are caught in the middle of this chaos. Rents remain painfully high. Competition for decent homes is fierce, and the promise that empty flats might ease the pressure feels increasingly hollow. Knowing that thousands of homes exist but are effectively locked away only deepens the sense of injustice. This is why the empty flats issue resonates so deeply. It's not just about numbers, it's about trust. Trust in the idea that the housing system serves people who live and work in the city, not just those who invest from afar. Trust in political leadership to balance economic reality with social responsibility. and trust that London hasn't crossed a point of no return, the mayor's struggle reflects a much bigger problem facing not just London, but many global cities. When housing becomes primarily a financial instrument, markets lose their connection to human needs. Prices disconnect from wages, supply disconnects from demand, and eventually, something has to give. Some analysts believe these empty flats are an early warning signal, not necessarily of an immediate crash, but of a prolonged correction where prices stagnate, confidence erodes, and policy mistakes become far more costly. Others argue that London's long-term appeal will eventually pull the market back into balance. But even optimists admit the next few years are unlikely to look like the last decade. Politically, the pressure is only going to increase. Calls for stricter vacancy taxes, compulsory rental schemes, and tougher planning rules are growing louder. At the same time, the property industry is warning that overregulation could choke off development entirely, making the housing shortage even worse in the long run. It's a delicate balancing act, and right now, it's clear that balance hasn't been found. What makes this moment especially significant is timing. The wider economy is fragile, household finances are stretched, and housing costs are one of the biggest drivers of public frustration. A visible failure in the housing system has the power to reshape elections, redefine political careers, and alter policy directions for years. The image of thousands of empty flats standing dark at night while Londoners struggle is a powerful one. It cuts through economic jargon and goes straight to the heart of the issue. And that image is now attached to the mayor's leadership, fairly or not. Whether this situation becomes a turning point or just another chapter in London, this long housing saga remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The idea that London US property market is untouchable has been shaken. The myth of endless demand and guaranteed growth no longer feels secure. And when confidence goes, it doesn't come back easily. For investors, this is a moment to reassess risk rather than chase past returns. For policymakers, it's a reminder that housing cannot be treated like any other commodity. And for ordinary Londoners, it's a bitter confirmation of what many have felt for years. The system hasn't been built with them in mind. As the debate over these 2,500 empty flats continues, the spotlight on City Hall will only grow brighter. Every statement, every policy move, every hesitation will be scrutinized. The pressure that triggered this so-called breakdown isn't going away. If anything, it's just beginning. Thanks for watching UK Economic Report. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on the latest UK economic news, expert analysis, and financial insights that matter to you.